Hey there, guys. We just got an update about Shinobi of Unknown Origin, or the January Clash of Wills Another Boss. So, if you've been following along from last week, you know that they introduced the Clash of Wills Another mode, and this boss had a lot of stuff going on. I made a video talking about all of the things dealing with this boss. Other people made videos. The general consensus from, it seems to be the majority of players, was that the January boss had quite a few questionable design decisions, a lot of stuff going on. It seemed sort of unpopular by the majority of the community. Barely anyone could get a proper rank 1. All kind of stuff going on. I made a video about it. Other people have made videos talking about it. Anyway, surprisingly enough, they are now addressing those concerns during the event. Now that can sometimes be a, questionable decision. Should they just leave it as is, bad design or not? Or should they adjust an event mid-event? I'm curious to see your comments. Do you think they should have adjusted it immediately, like they're doing? Or should they have just left it in a overall not good state for the event? Because technically speaking, it was cappable, and I think something like 22 or so people capped it during the first week. But as opposed to what we're used to, more than 1,000 players getting their caps in, we had like 20-ish people getting a cap. So obviously it was a huge detour from what we're used to. But they're making adjustments. Personally, I am kind of glad that they're stepping in immediately, even though it wasn't technically broken, not counting the technical soft lock bug. But as far as like the design, it wasn't like really broken, just overtuned. To put it simply, so I think it's okay that they're going in and making adjustments, because again, even though like 20 people did manage to cap it, the game community is bigger than 20 people. So there was like over 1,000 people that were kind of like blocked off from this. Anyway, so what are they doing to the boss? Quite a few changes. We'll have to see it in game to see exactly how far the changes went. Just from an early glance, it looks like, they might have gone pretty heavy on the changes, the nerfs. It might actually go from being a crazy boss to a fairly easy boss. I don't know until trying it in game. The server is still down. But some of the changes they are making. So the boss will no longer inflict zombie or remove the resistance to zombie. So the whole thing with zombie resistance removal is kind of amusing, because that doesn't even exist. There's literally no way to resist zombie, but the boss did have an effect to attempt to remove your resistances. That was sort of funny. It didn't do anything, but the zombie application, that was a major problem, and I talked extensively about why that was a problem in the previous video, because the boss does it every third turn. You can't use the morale bar to cure it until turn 7. You couldn't bring units like Melissa, at least not reasonably, because of her auto re-raise effect. So the whole zombie, in the way it was implemented during this boss, was just really not working out so well, and it kind of almost forced you, or at least heavily pushed you, into having to win by turn 5, which is like the turn after they apply zombie or whatever. But now the boss won't do zombie at all, which means basically we can now take Melissa again, without having to do any kind of self-damage killing effects thing. You could just take Melissa and go. And that, on its own, is a massive change, because Melissa should be really good for this boss. The boss does pretty painful physical damage. With Melissa on the party, you can imbue the boss for 4 turns to get like no damage taken from physical. Melissa does 200 dark resist. That's a big deal for this boss. Melissa does healing down, so the whole Mania 25% damage then heal will actually only heal by 12%. So Melissa just right off the top knocks 12% of the boss's HP off, which is like 3 billion damage needed less. Melissa brings Human Killer. Melissa can remove Imperils. Melissa can do great mitigation for Magical, which might even allow Esther to tank now. Like, Melissa is an amazing unit for this boss, but we couldn't take her because of the zombie. As good as she was, we couldn't really take her. Now we can. So that change all by itself is enormous. That's a huge change to the fight. So all the rest of this might not even have been really needed if we could just take Melissa. But that's, there was some other bad things. Here was another really unfortunate design decision. During turn 5, the boss would dispel himself at the start of the turn, and then he would go and do all his attacks, which was another reason you sort of had to win on turn 5, because surviving turn 5 was very hard when the boss had no breaks at all. Well, the boss will no longer dispel his breaks mid-turn on turn 5. That's another really big deal. So, again, we can now reasonably go beyond turn 5, and going all the way to turn 10 should not be a problem. Which is also going to mean you no longer have to do 15 billion damage. Because the reason you needed 15 billion damage in one turn is because if you went beyond turn 5, zombie was killing you, the boss would probably kill people because of no breaks. So, doing a turn 5 burst was just avoiding all that. Now you don't have to. Some buffs casted on the boss can now be dispelled. So this was the whole anti-mage mechanic that I mentioned in the video, and it really didn't just make any sense to just block mages from the fight because of those undispellable spirit buffs and all that. Well, now we can dispel them. So you can actually take your Ibarra, you can take your Void Mage Roka, you can take your whatever other mages you might be using, and they're not going to be unevenly penalized just for being a mage. And that's good. That's good. I don't really like the way they sometimes try to force you away from a whole character type, because, you may have a heavy mage team, and now you can use them. That's awesome. The number of actions performed by the boss at Echelon 5 has been reduced. Here's another thing I was talking about in a previous video. The boss had a 20 action limit, and like 10 of those were completely RNG, and they could have been like 10 AoE physicals in a row. It could have been 10 AoE non-elemental magics in a row. The whole chromatic wave syndrome. But now the boss has less actions per turn, which means the boss will have less just randomly chosen skills. So, you shouldn't at least have those turns where the boss is doing like 7 chakra waves on a turn and just brutalizes your entire party out of nowhere. And then other turns the boss will do none of them, and it's a huge RNG swing. Well, depending on how many actions less, that won't happen, because the boss always has scripted actions during the turn, and those eat up, depending on the turn, between 4 to 7 or 4 to 8 of the action limit, and then the remainder is the RNG. When the boss's action limit was at 20, that was like 12 randomly chosen actions, and they could be 12 chromatic waves or 12 chakra waves on this boss. But now if the boss has, let's just say 15, well, that's a whole lot less chance for the boss to just go wave crazy. So less RNG is neat. The boss's attack and magic parameters have been lowered. Basically, the boss will hit not as hard. This one, I personally don't think was specifically needed. Now, that being said, if you're taking Esther to tank the fight, this will make it, depending on how big of a reduction is, a lot more reasonable. because a big problem with Esther and being forced to take her was that she was a completely dead slot because she couldn't reasonably tank the fight. I do realize there's always ways to make it work. You can take external mitigations, you can take external racial mitigations, you could dedicate a lot of your party and your actions to keeping Esther alive. So you could make her tank, but it was unreasonable to do so because Esther is terrible. Let's just get it out there. Esther is 2 years old. She hasn't gotten any kind of meaningful upgrades, and that hasn't changed. But if the boss is not hitting as hard, and we can take Melissa to fix those mitigation problems, then Esther might be able to tank this. So that means Esther is less of a dead slot. So those of us that don't have Murray, well, that will be, neat. So we'll have to see how much weaker the boss is in terms of damage dealt. The boss's parameter increase during Mania mode has been reduced. So if you tried the fight, you know that when the boss went into Mania mode, he got crazy bulky. And trying to deal chip damage during Mania mode, it was possible, but it was hard. And you dealt very little damage to the boss during Mania mode. Which, again, was a whole nother reason it really pushed you into doing 15 billion damage in one turn during the chance turn, because during Mania mode, the boss was just unreasonably tanky, and dealing damage during that mode was just not easy to do. Well, now, depending how much they reduced the parameters, it might be reasonable to chip the boss down during Mania mode, and again, that can give you the entire 10 turns to set up your burst and get a rank 1 clear during chance mode if you've got reasonable damage you can deal during Mania mode. So let's just say you're going to work the boss down to something like 40% health during turns 1 through 9, activate Vertex on turn 9, and then on turn 10 to chance mode, you've only got to deal 40% of the boss's health, which at 15 billion would be, oh god, we're doing math, something like 6 billion damage, which should be a lot more reasonable than 15 billion. Like, a lot more reasonable. So, yeah. And then, damage modifiers for Blade Dance and Chakra Wave have been adjusted. Those are the non-elemental AoEs. Blade Dance is the physical version AoE, and Chakra Wave is the non-elemental version. So if the non-elemental AoEs are dealing less damage, once again, that makes it more reasonable for Esther to actually tank this. Because if she's omni-tanking, all of those are hitting Esther. And previously, I believe they were at 10x modifier. So whatever they're being reduced to will be, less than 10x. Not sure how much less. But it'll be dealing less damage, which again makes it more possible for Esther to tank this. Now, all of these put together, will the boss be too easy? I don't know. I will say that this is like 7 or 8 changes all at the same time, which means, and the boss was already technically beatable at rank 1. So, is it going to go from completely insane to too easy? I don't know. Have to try it in game. Maybe, though. Because this is a lot of changes. And I certainly don't want to say anything like they shouldn't have changed anything, because they definitely should have, in my opinion. Maybe they should have changed a little bit less than this. Like, not gone so overboard on the nerfing. But still, something really did need to be done, in my opinion. So, I'm glad they're changing things. Some of these, like the AoE 3-turn zombie, the boss dispelling itself mid-turn, the mage hate, like those were absolutely needed. There was no reason for any of these to even be there in the first place. Those are great changes. The rest of these are, I would say, not as necessary. At this point, it's too late. What's done is done. They're being changed. But I would say these maybe we didn't really have to have added to. I think just these first three changes would have made the fight very reasonable. Taking away Zombie, which allows you to bring Melissa. Melissa by herself checks off a bunch of boxes for this fight and makes so many mechanics more reasonable just by having her on the team. The self-dispel turn 5 and the mage penalties. Those were all very necessary in my opinion. The rest of this, kind of whatever. But it'll definitely be an easier boss at this point. I will be doing it when server comes up. I will be trying it out, and assuming I can make a rank 1 work, I will post the video. I might even stream when servers come up. We'll stream version 2. I have to say, it depends on my mood. Or if I have my coffee or not. But I might stream just for a little bit. Short stream. But I'll definitely post a video regardless. Also, I will real quick, let's see here. People love this. During video summons this week, I got, oh Lord, let me resize this for the video. Anyway, here you go. During video summons, I got myself a Murray during video summons. I should have done this in advance. Anyway, there you go. You can see on screen. I got a Murray during video summons. I got that on Wednesday. Just one Murray. As we know, they took her shards away from the shard shops. That hasn't changed. So I can't use her on a Noctis party, meaning I won't be using her, at least on my initial plans for rank 1, because I cannot take her plus Noctis at only rank 1. But now that I have an EX1 Murray, I can maybe do a clear without Noctis and bring in Murray. I would have like someone else be the leader, and I could try to show Murray in a clear. It'll just be an EX1 Murray, but it gives me options. Like I said, I personally didn't really want to go 45k for her, but getting her from video summons, why not? Why not? Anyway, let's see here. There we go. So, servers should be up in a few hours, unless they come up early. Clash of Wills is being adjusted, and we'll be trying it out tomorrow. Also, we've got, Dark Visions and all that. So, see you then for version 2 of Clash of Wills Another.